The phone went silent. My own son. Ethan. I had just told me I wasn't welcome at his home for Christmas. The reason his wife, Jessica, and her parents thought my Mexican food would lower the tone of their party. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I looked at the automatic payment notification for their $2,800 mortgage, a payment scheduled to leave my account in 3 days. And I smiled. This is the story of how I took back my dignity. If you believe family should be about respect, not just money, make sure you're subscribed. The air in my kitchen was thick with the smell of home, not the sterile, lemon-scented cleaner my daughter-in-law, Jessica, preferred. But the rich, earthy aroma of cumin and chili powder toasting in a hot pan. I was making carnitas, slow cooking the pork until it was tender enough to fall apart with a fork, the way my mother taught me. The sound of the meat sizzling in its own fat was a kind of music, a rhythm I'd known my whole life. I smiled, picturing the look on my son Ethan's face when he'd take his first bite at the Christmas dinner I thought we'd all be sharing. It's funny how clearly you can see the beginning of the end, but only when you're looking back. 5 years ago, I saw nothing but a beginning. I remember the day Ethan and Jessica closed on their house. A beautiful 2-story colonial in a neighborhood I could have only dreamed of at their age. I stood with them on the freshly cut lawn, the keys dangling from Ethan's hand. And I felt a pride that filled my chest so much it almost hurt to breathe. I handed them an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $47,000. Dad, this is too much, Ethan had said, his eyes wide. Jessica, however, didn't miss a beat. She threw her arms around my neck, her perfume flooding my senses. Oh, Cruz, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. I just patted her back. I just want you to have the best start, son, I said. My eyes on Ethan. Anything for my family. That became my mantra. I framed a photo from that day and kept it on my mantelpiece. In it, they're both beaming, holding a sold sign in front of their new home. A perfect picture. I looked at that photo often, especially around the first of the month. That's when the automatic payment would go through. $2,800 every month for 60 straight months. My bank account would shrink, and their mortgage would be paid. It was a routine, a quiet act of love I never mentioned. I figured they knew. I figured it was understood. The phone rang one Tuesday afternoon, pulling me from my thoughts of the past. It was Jessica. Her tone was bright, but with an edge I'd come to recognize. It was the tone she used before she asked for something. Cruz, how are you? I'm good. Jessica, just getting some cooking done. How are things? Oh, busy. Hey, I was just standing here in the kitchen. And I was thinking, it's just so dated. I stayed silent. I'd heard this before. The countertops are that awful laminate, and the cabinets are so dark, it makes the whole house feel sad. For the Christmas party, with all our friends coming over, it's a little embarrassing. I closed my eyes and pictured the kitchen. It was perfectly functional, but that wasn't the point. Isayad, a quiet breath of resignation. What did you have in mind? An hour later, I had agreed to put $18,000 for a full kitchen remodel on my credit card. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, custom white cabinets. The works. When I hung up, I felt a familiar, dull ache, but I pushed it down. Anything for my family. I whispered to the empty room. A few days later, I was sitting at my own kitchen table, paying my bills. It's a habit I've had since I started my first business from the back of a truck. I keep every receipt, every invoice, every statement. I track every dollar. It's not about being cheap, it's about being careful. It's how I built everything I have. Ethan used to watch me when he was a boy, his chin resting on the table. You have to know where every dollar goes. Ethan, I'd tell him, it's the only way to stay honest. I wondered if he remembered that, looking at the stack of statements detailing the money flowing out to him and Jessica. I doubted it. The call that changed everything came on a Friday evening. It was Ethan. His voice was strained, hesitant. Hey, Dad. Ethan, I was just thinking about you. Are you too excited for Christmas? There was a pause, a silence just long enough to make my stomach clench. Yeah. About that. Dad, we need to talk. I leaned against the counter, the warmth of the stove behind me suddenly feeling very far away. Okay. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Exactly. It's just Jessica and her parents. You know, they're helping plan the party this year, and they want to go for a more traditional feel. Traditional, I asked, my voice flat. I knew what was coming, but I wanted to hear him say it. I needed to hear him say it. Yeah. You know, turkey, ham, that kind of thing. And, well, they were a little concerned that, well, that your food might be a bit much. Much? The smell. Dad. He finally stammered out, the words tumbling over each other. They said it's a little strong, and they don't want you to feel out of place or uncomfortable. Out of place. In my own son's home, the home I was paying for. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, and in that silence, I heard it. A woman's sharp whisper in the background, clear as day. Just tell him. Ethan, it's our house. Jessica. The sound of her voice was like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. It opened a door inside me. And all the little hurts, the small slights, the ignored sacrifices of the last 5 years came flooding out. It wasn't about the food. It was never about the food. It was about me, my heritage, where I came from. I was the embarrassing, strong-smelling secret they were happy to take money from, but not happy to have at their party. Dad, are you there? Ethan's voice was small, tinny. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing up. The phone in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My own hand was shaking, a slight tremor I couldn't control. I looked around my kitchen, at the pots and pans that had fed him his entire life, at the spices that told the story of his grandparents, and I felt a coldness spread through my chest. A deep, glacial cold that extinguished every warm feeling I had for him in that moment. Without a word, I ended the call. The click was deafening in the quiet room. For a long time, I just stood there, leaning against the counter. The sizzle of the pork in the pan, the only sound. He didn't feel anger. Not yet. He just felt empty. A hollowed-out space where a father's love used to be. Then, slowly, deliberately, I walked to the table and picked up my phone. My hands were steady now. I opened my banking app, my thumb moving across the screen with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I navigated to the Scheduled Payments tab. There it was. At the top of the list, Ethan and Jessica mortgage, $2. Babe. Next payment scheduled in 3 days. A pop-up appeared on the screen. Its sterile black text, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment? I stared at the words. This wasn't just about one payment. This was about all of them. This was the end of the line. I took a deep breath. The scent of cumin and chili filling my lungs one last time before it all changed. My thumb pressed down on the screen. Confirm. A green banner flashed for a moment at the bottom of the screen. Simple and final. Payment canceled. The green banner vanished. But the words "payment canceled" seemed to be burned onto the back of my eyelids. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still glowing in my hand, the silence of the house pressing in on me, the savory aroma of the carnitas, which had felt like home just minutes before, now smelled like a memory from someone else's life. With a slow, mechanical movement, I reached over and turned off the stove. The gentle sizzle died, and the silence became absolute. I took the pan off the heat and left it on the counter. I wasn't hungry anymore. For the next few days, a strange sort of quiet settled over my life. The phone didn't ring. No angry texts appeared on my screen. It was as if by severing that one financial artery, I had been completely cut out of their world. Part of me felt a hollow ache, the phantom limb of a father's love still tingling with loss, but another part of me felt lighter. The constant, low-level anxiety of waiting for the next request, the next veiled demand, was gone. I was just living. On the third day, I called my younger sister, Maria. She's the only one I ever told the full extent of my financial support for Ethan. She never approved. They're parasites. Cruz. She'd said a year ago. They're sucking you dry, and they don't even respect you. I had defended them then. He's my son. Maria, I'm helping him build a life. This time, my voice was different when I told her what happened. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just laid out the facts, the phone call, the comments about my food, Jessica's voice in the background, the canceled payment. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Good, she finally said, her voice firm. It's about time. Are you okay? Hermano. I will be, I said. And for the first time, I actually believed it. The storm broke 2 days later. My phone began to vibrate violently on the kitchen counter, buzzing like an angry hornet. It was a number I didn't recognize. But the screen lit up again and again. Then, a string of text messages. All caps. Riddled with typos. It was Jessica. Cruz, pick up the phone. Our cards aren't working. Where are you? Finally, I answered. The sound that hit my ear was not a voice, but a shriek of pure, unadulterated panic. Cruz, oh my God. Finally, we're stuck. We're at the airport. My parents are here, and my card was declined. Ethan's was declined. We just got back from Aspen, and we can't even get a car to take us home. This is a nightmare. I listened, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. There was no hello. No, how are you? Just a raw, unfiltered spew of entitlement. She didn't even consider that there might be a reason for their financial trouble. In her mind, the world had simply broken, and I was the one who was supposed to fix it. You have to come get us, she screeched. This is your fault. You must have done something. There it was. The blame, the immediate assumption that the family ATM, had malfunctioned. A month ago, I would have been in my car before she finished her sentence, full of apologies and worry. But the man she was yelling at was gone. He had died on the floor of his kitchen 5 days ago. In his place was someone else. Someone colder and clearer. I took a breath and spoke, my voice so calm it sounded like a stranger's. "Jessica, that is not my problem." The screeching stopped. I could hear her breathing on the other end, sharp and ragged. What did you just say?" I said. I repeated, enunciating each word. "That it is not my problem. You are adults. You have a phone. Call a taxi or an Uber." Then, before she could unleash the next wave, I pressed the red icon on my screen and ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the counter and took a slow, deep breath. A boundary had been drawn, the first of many. The next morning, the real retaliation came. It was a link, sent to me by Maria with a simple message. "You need to see this." I clicked it. The page that loaded was a local, low-budget news blog, the kind that thrives on neighborhood drama and gossip. And there, at the top of the page, was my face. It was an old photo, taken from my own social media, from a family barbecue years ago. I was smiling. Underneath it, a headline in big, bold letters. "Heartless father abandons elderly couple and son's family at airport during holidays." My blood ran cold. I read the article, my hands gripping the phone so tightly I thought the screen might crack. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It painted a picture of a cruel, vindictive old man who, in a fit of rage over a minor holiday disagreement, had suddenly and maliciously cut off his loving son and daughter-in-law, leaving them and her frail, elderly parents stranded and penniless. It was filled with quotes from a source close to the family who described my behavior as erratic and controlling. They twisted my years of support into a tool of manipulation and my final act of self-preservation into an act of petty cruelty. They had taken a private family pain and twisted it into a public spectacle designed to humiliate me. They hadn't just disrespected me, they had tried to destroy my reputation. The hollow ache in my chest was gone now. The sadness was gone. In its place, a fire ignited. It wasn't a hot, reckless fire, but a cold, blue flame of pure, focused rage. They had escalated this. They had made this public. "Fine," I said to the empty room. The words hung in the air. A quiet promise. "You want public? I'll give you public." That night, I did not sleep. I went down to my office in the basement. A room filled with file cabinets and boxes of old records. I flicked on the light. The fluorescent bulb humming to life, casting long shadows. For the first time, I wasn't looking at these records as a businessman, but as a strategist. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a war, and I was about to gather my ammunition. I started with the bank statements. I pulled the files for the last 5 years. The pages thin and cool to the touch. I worked backwards, month by month, and with a bright yellow highlighter, I marked every single payment of $2. $800 sent to their mortgage company. 60 payments. The yellow line grew longer and longer. A bright, damning trail of my own generosity. Then I found the credit card statements. There, it was an $18. 000 charge to a high-end kitchen contractor. I highlighted that too. I found the wire transfer confirmation for the $47. 000 down payment, printed from my home equity line of credit. Highlighted. Around dry M. Fueled by black coffee and a resolve as hard as steel. I moved to the next phase. I opened my laptop and navigated to Jessica's Instagram page. It was a curated fantasy of a perfect life. There she was, posing in her brand new kitchen, the granite countertops gleaming. Her caption read, "So blessed to have our dream kitchen come to life. It's amazing what you can do when you set your mind to it. Blessed number, dream big." I took a screenshot. I scrolled further. A picture of her new SUV in the driveway. A family photo from their vacation in Aspen, the one they had just returned from when they were stranded. Post after post of a lifestyle they hadn't earned. Presented to the world as the fruits of their own labor. And then I found the crown jewel. A photo of her, Ethan, and her parents, raising champagne glasses in the living room. The caption read, "Celebrating 2 years in our beautiful home. Hard work pays off. So proud of everything we have built." We. I stared at that word. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I saved the image. My movements precise and controlled. I wasn't just collecting receipts anymore. I was collecting their lies, preserved forever in the digital amber of social media. The plan formed in my mind, clear and sharp as a shard of glass. They wanted to put on a show for their friends and her family. They wanted to present themselves as a successful ornate, self-made couple. They were so desperate for that image that they were willing to cast me, their benefactor, as the villain in their story. I decided, in that cold basement office, that I would give them the one thing they couldn't handle: the truth. I would create a portfolio, a complete financial record of their perfect life, and I would deliver it on the one night they wanted to shine the brightest: Christmas Eve. The next morning, I called Maria. I laid out the entire plan. From the bank statements, to the Instagram screenshots, to the final delivery. "Are you sure about this?" "Cruz," she asked, her voice tight with concern. You can't take this back once you do it." "They started this." "Maria," I said, my voice low and even. "They put my face in the newspaper and called me a monster. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about setting the record straight. It's about the truth." There was a pause. Then I heard her take a deep, steadying breath. "Okay," she said, her voice filled with a fierce loyalty that warmed me to my core. "Okay. Hermano. Show them who they messed with." That afternoon, I compiled everything into a single PDF file. Each page was meticulously organized, the down payment followed by every mortgage receipt in chronological order, the kitchen renovation invoice, and finally, a gallery of Jessica's social media posts, each one paired with the corresponding bank record that proved who had actually paid for it. The final document was 20 pages long. I put the file on a USB drive and drove to a Kinko's downtown. The air inside was warm and smelled of toner. I walked up to the counter and handed the drive to the young man working there. "I need 12 copies of this file. Please," I said. "Color, double-sided. And I'd like each one spiral-bound with a clear plastic cover." He nodded, his eyes on his screen. "No problem. It'll be about an hour." I waited, sitting on a plastic chair and watching the rhythmic hum and whir of the industrial printers. I felt strangely calm. The decision had been made. The weapons had been forged. Now, all that was left was the battle itself. An hour later, he called my name and handed me a heavy box. I opened it in my car. Inside, 12 identical dossiers sat in neat stacks. They looked professional, oficial, final. Christmas Eve arrived with a soft, silent fall of snow. The world outside my window was hushed and white. I spent the day in quiet contemplation, not of what I was about to do, but of everything that had led me to this point. I felt no joy, but I also felt no doubt. As evening fell, I went to my closet and put on my best suit. It was dark charcoal, with a crisp white shirt and a simple .com elegant silk tie. I wasn't dressing for a party. I was dressing for a reckoning. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back was older, his eyes holding a new, hard-won clarity. I went to my dining room table. The 12 dossiers were stacked there, a dark tower in the center of the polished wood. I picked them up, feeling their collective weight in my hands. It felt like the weight of 5 years, the weight of every dollar, every sacrifice, every lie. I walked to the front door, the box held securely under my arm. Outside, the snow was coming down faster, blanketing the world in a beautiful, cold silence. I stepped out into the night, the fresh, frigid air sharp against my face, and started my car. The engine was a low growl in the quiet dark as I pulled away from the curb, driving toward my son's house, driving toward the truth. The drive to Ethan's neighborhood was a journey through a different world. The modest, older homes in my part of town gave way to sprawling new constructions, each one a fortress of beige stucco and oversized windows. Every house was draped in elaborate Christmas lights. Professional, uniform displays of wealth that glittered against the fresh white snow. It was a perfect, manufactured winter wonderland. I saw their house from a block away. It was the brightest on the street, a beacon of festive cheer. Cars lined the curb on both sides, Mercedes, BMWs. A new-looking Tesla plugged into a charging station in the driveway. The sounds of a party, a faint thrum of bass, and the high-pitched melody of laughter, drifted through the cold air. I pulled my car over to the curb, a good 50 yards down the street, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was a comfort. For a moment, I just sat there in the dark, watching the house. I could picture the scene inside Jessica, playing the perfect hostess, her laugh a little too loud, Ethan, hovering by her side, a drink in his hand, smiling at jokes he didn't find funny, her parents, Richard and Carol, holding court, accepting compliments on their daughter's beautiful home, and all their friends, the ones they were so desperate to impress, sipping wine and admiring the granite countertops I'd paid for. A wave of doubt, cold and sharp, washed over me. What was I really doing? This was my son. This was Christmas Eve. Was I about to walk in there and detonate a bomb in the middle of his life? Simply out of spite. My hand rested on the box of dossiers beside me. Maybe I should just turn around, go home, leave them to their perfect, hollow little lives. Then, as clearly as if it were printed on the back of my hand, I saw the headline from the news blog, "Heartless Father." I felt the sting of that public humiliation all over again. They hadn't just shut me out, they had tried to erase me, to rewrite the story of my life, and cast me as the villain. They had left me no choice. This wasn't about spite. This was about truth. My resolve hardened, settling like a stone in my gut. I was not the villain of this story, and I was about to prove it. I got out of the car, pulling the collar of my coat up against the cold. The box felt heavy and solid under my arm. The snow crunched softly beneath my leather shoes as I walked toward the house, each step deliberate and final. Standing on the front porch, The warmth and noise from inside washed over me. Through the beveled glass of the front door, I could see the party in full swing. Laughter. Music. The clinking of glasses. It was a world I had funded but was no longer a part of. I took one last, deep breath of the cold night air and pressed the doorbell. The cheerful Christmas chimes were cut short as the door swung open. It was Ethan. He was holding a glass of red wine, a practiced party smile plastered on his face. The smile didn't just fade when he saw me, it shattered. The color drained from his cheeks, and his eyes widened in a mixture of shock and fear. "Dad," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "What? What are you doing here?" I looked past him, into the warm, crowded entryway. "I came to deliver Christmas presents," I said, my voice even and calm, carrying just enough for a few people nearby to turn their heads. Before he could recover enough to block me, I stepped past him, moving out of the cold and into the stifling heat of the party. As I moved into the foyer, a hush began to fall. It started with the people closest to the door, a ripple of silence that spread through the room as heads turned and conversations faltered. The music was still playing softly, but it suddenly seemed loud in the absence of human chatter. Every eye in the room was on me. I saw Jessica across the living room, her back to me, laughing with a group of women. She felt the change in atmosphere and turned, her smile freezing on her face when she saw me standing there. Her parents, Richard and Carol, stood near the fireplace, their expressions turning from smug satisfaction to pure disbelief, ignoring the stares. I walked with a steady, unhurried pace toward the dining room. The table was a spectacle. It was set for at least a dozen guests with gleaming silverware, crystal glasses, and a massive floral centerpiece. It looked like something out of a magazine. It was the table I had paid for. In the dining room I had paid for. In the house I had paid for. I began to walk around the perimeter of the table. At each empty place setting, I reached into my box and placed one of the spiral-bound dossiers, the clear plastic covers reflecting the light from the chandelier above. One by one, I laid them down, each one landing with a soft, definitive thud on the polished wood. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jessica's voice was a harsh shriek that cut through the silence. She rushed toward me, her face a mask of fury. She reached the table just as I was placing the last booklet, and she lunged for it, her fingers trying to snatch it away. I held it firm, my grip like iron. I didn't look at her. Instead, I raised my voice just enough to be heard clearly throughout the silent house. I made eye contact with her father, Richard, then with the other guests, who were now watching with a mixture of confusion and morbid curiosity. "I paid for this table," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "I paid for the food that was about to be served on it. And I paid for the very roof over all of your heads." I finally turned my eyes to Jessica, whose hand was still trying to pry the dossier from my grasp. "The least you can do," I finished, my voice dropping to a low Bratters, dangerous level, "is look at the receipts." I let go. For a second, nobody moved. Then, one of Carol's friends, a woman in a pearl necklace, tentatively reached out and picked up the dossier in front of her. She flipped open the cover. Across the table, another man did the same. Soon, a rustle of turning pages filled the room, a sound louder than any explosion. I stood back and watched. I saw expressions shift from confusion to intrigue, then to wide-eyed shock. I saw people leaning closer to their neighbors, pointing at a page, whispering. I saw a man hold up a page with the highlighted credit card statement for the kitchen remodel and look from the paper to the gleaming kitchen visible just beyond the dining room. A woman near the fireplace gasped audibly. "My God." "Richard," she said to Jessica's father, her voice carrying across the room. "It says here he paid over $168,000 in their mortgage payments alone." Richard's face, normally ruddy and cheerful, was a mottled, pale gray. He looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Another guest, a younger man standing near Ethan, pointed to one of the last pages in his booklet. "Hey, Jessica," he called out, his voice laced with a cruel sort of amusement. "Isn't this your Instagram post? The one where you said you and Ethan saved for years to get your dream kitchen?" All eyes swiveled to Jessica. Her face had gone from red with rage to a ghostly white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked trapped, a cornered animal under the glare of a dozen sets of headlights. Her perfect party, her perfect image, was dissolving into ash right before her eyes. Finally, I turned my gaze to my son. He hadn't moved. He was standing frozen by the doorway, his wineglass still in his hand, looking at the floor as if hoping it would swallow him whole. He was the only one not looking at the evidence. He didn't need to. He had lived it. I walked slowly toward him, the whispers and turning pages fading into the background. I stopped a few feet in front of him. The entire room was holding its breath, waiting. I looked at his face, the face I had loved and nurtured his entire life, and I felt a profound and bottomless sadness. "Do you have anything to say?" "Ethan," I asked. My voice wasn't angry. It was quiet. It was tired. He wouldn't look at me. He just shook his head. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. A tear traced a path down his cheek and dripped onto the polished hardwood floor. That was all the answer I needed. I gave a small, slow nod. A final acknowledgement of the chasm that now lay between us. Without another word, I turned my back on him, on Jessica, on the wreckage of their beautifully constructed lies. I walked through the silent, staring crowd, my footsteps echoing in the sudden void. I opened the front door and stepped back out into the cold, clean night, pulling the door shut behind me, leaving them to the deafening sound of the truth. The click of the latch behind me was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a door closing on a lifetime. I walked down the stone pathway, my feet steady on the snow-dusted ground, not looking back. I didn't need to. The image of my son's tear-streaked, ashamed face was seared into my memory, a permanent brand on my heart. The sounds of the party had died completely. I had left a vacuum in my wake, a silence filled with the rustling of paper and the deafening weight of truth. I reached my car. The cold metal of the door handle a shock to my warm hand. Inside, the silence was a refuge. I started the engine. The low rumble, a comforting presence in the quiet night. I didn't speed away. I pulled out onto the street slowly, my movements measured, and drove away from the house that was, for all intents and purposes, no longer my son's. The windshield wipers swept back and forth, clearing away the falling snow in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the hot rush of victory I might have expected. Instead, what washed over me was a profound, bone-deep weariness, followed by an even more profound sense of release. It was the feeling of putting down a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for 5 long years. The weight of their expectations, their demands, their silent, conditional love, it was all gone. I had amputated a part of my own life. And while the wound was raw and deep, I knew, for the first time in a long time, that I was going to heal. Before I was even halfway home, my phone, which I had left on the passenger seat, began to buzz. A text from Ethan, then another, then a call. I glanced at the screen, saw his name, and felt nothing. Just a quiet finality. I reached over, my eyes still on the road, and long pressed the power button. The screen went black. The buzzing stopped. The next few days passed in a haze of quiet solitude. It was Christmas Day. Then the day after, but the holidays had ceased to exist for me. I spent the time in my own home, listening to old music, reading, and simply allowing myself to feel the vast, empty space that had opened up in my life. It was a space filled with both grief and possibility. It was Maria who finally broke the silence. She came over 3 days after the party, letting herself in with her key and placing a container of her homemade soup on my kitchen counter. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just looked at me, her eyes full of a deep, knowing sympathy, and gave me a hug that said everything. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had assembled my dossiers of truth, and she told me what she had heard through the family grapevine. The party ended about 5 minutes after you left. She began, her voice low. Our cousin, Sophia, who was there with her husband, said it was like a bomb went off. Once people finished reading, nobody knew what to say. They just started making excuses and leaving, one by one. They couldn't get out of there fast enough. She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. Sophia said Jessica just stood there, white as a sheet, while her parents were trying to do damage control, telling people it was all a misunderstanding, that you were a confused old man. Nobody was buying it, not after seeing the proof in black and white. According to Sophia, the real fireworks started after the last guest had fled. She had been in the entryway, putting on her coat, and couldn't help but overhear the screaming match that erupted between Ethan and Jessica. Jessica had blamed him for being weak, for not throwing me out. Ethan, finally finding some semblance of a spine, had fired back that this was all her fault, that her greed and her ambition had destroyed their lives. The fight was apparently vicious, full of accusations and insults that could never be taken back. It ended with Jessica's parents packing her a bag and taking her back to their house, leaving Ethan alone in the big, empty home that was now a monument to his failure. A few days into the new year, I received a certified letter. It was from the bank's legal department. The language was cold and formal, but the message was simple due to non-payment. The mortgage was in default. Foreclosure proceedings had been initiated. It was happening. The natural, inevitable consequence of their actions was now in motion. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and felt another layer of the burden lift. The calls started trickling in after that, not from Ethan or Jessica, but from other family members, some of whom had been at the party. My nephew called to apologize. Uncle Cruz, he said, his voice full of shame. I read that article online. I should have known better. I'm so sorry. What you did? You had every right. One by one, they reached out, offering words of support, validating the choice I had made. It wasn't praise I was looking for, but the simple acknowledgement of the truth was a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still so tender. One afternoon, about a week after the party, I found myself standing in my kitchen, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window. I felt a pang of hunger, a real, honest hunger, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. On impulse, I opened the refrigerator. I saw the ingredients for carnitas, still there, waiting. Slowly, I began to cook. I took out the pork, seasoned it with the familiar blend of spices, and placed it in the heavy pan. I turned on the stove, and soon, the kitchen was filled with that same rich, comforting aroma. But this time, it was different. I wasn't cooking to please anyone. I wasn't cooking to earn my place at a table where I wasn't wanted. I was cooking for myself. As the meat sizzled and the scent of my heritage filled my home, I found myself looking at my phone. I opened my photo gallery and found the screenshot I had taken of Jessica's post. "Hard work pays off. So proud of everything we have built." I stared at it for a long moment. Not with anger, but with a kind of detached pity. They had built nothing. They had only taken. Theirs was a house of cards, built on a foundation of my money and their lies. And all it took was a single gust of truth to blow it all down. With a quiet finality, I selected the image and pressed delete. It was gone. It no longer had any power over me. I stood there, watching the snow fall outside my window, and I understood something with perfect clarity. For years, I had operated under a terrible lie. I believed that my value as a father, as a man, was tied to what I could provide. I thought I could buy love, purchase respect, finance a family. But love isn't a transaction. Respect isn't an invoice you can pay. I had poured $250,000 into a black hole, trying to fill a void that was never mine to fill. The real price was my own self-respect, and I had almost given it all away for free. That evening, I took the carnitas I had made and drove to Maria's house. Her home was nothing like Ethan's. It was smaller, filled with the comfortable clutter of a life well lived. Her husband and her 2 kids were there. And when I walked in, their faces lit up with genuine warmth. We sat around their dinner table, passing bowls of rice and beans, spooning the tender pork onto warm tortillas. We talked. We laughed. And I felt a sense of belonging that I realized I had been chasing in all the wrong places. Here, I wasn't an ATM. I wasn't an obligation or an embarrassment. I was just Cruz. I was family. Looking at the happy faces around me, I knew my journey was over. The anger had passed. The need for revenge was gone. All that was left was a quiet, peaceful strength. I had lost a son, but I had found myself, and in the end, it was a trade I was willing to make. Sometimes, the family you choose is the one that truly saves you, and sometimes, the most important thing you can ever build isn't a house for your children, but a home within yourself,